Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Anderson, and today I'm going to show y'all how to catch redfish using live bait. Redfish are, and we all know, one of the most fun fish to catch out there in the ocean. They have amazing predatory senses. Their sense of smell and being able to pick up on live bait is second to none, especially for your inshore species of fish. So let's get right to it. So I'm going to show y'all my 3 favorite setups that I like to use for catching these redfish using live bait. So the first setup is going to be probably the most popular right now, and we all know it's the popping cork. So for a popping corks are really easy. All you want to remember is that you want your brass beads on your leader line side, and then you want these plastic beads to be on your main line or the top end of your fishing rig. But a popping cork, really easy. You just tie on your popping cork. Again, you want your plastic beads on top, brass beads on the bottom. That will allow your cork to sit correctly in the water. And also these brass beads are going to create more of that noise in the water. So you guys, this is the easiest rig to use for catching redfish using a live bait. So I like to use 10 to 20 pound leader line and about 1.5 to 3 feet length of leader line. And you can adjust this based on where you're fishing. And that's going to be tied with, so I'm going to tie on a 2/0 size hook right here that I'm going to use. And with this hook, you can have shrimp, you can have live shrimp, you can have cut crab on it, you can have mullet, you could have a live mullet on this as well. And you guys, right now we're going to be showing y'all some footage of us using this rig right here and some of the different baits that we like to use and catching some redfish using this rig. So this is the most simple fishing rig for catching redfish with live bait. You're not going to get it hung up on anything because the cork also acts as a bobber, and that will allow your bait to be suspended as low as you tie your leader line. So about 1.5 to 2.5 feet or so is ideal. So that's the first way to catch redfish using live bait is with the popping cork. Now, the most popular bait, if you have it in your fishery, we don't really have those in the mid-Atlantic, but down in Florida and your southern fisheries and across the Gulf Coast down in Texas, you guys are lucky enough y'all have live shrimp. And live shrimp is probably the most popular live bait that you're going to use underneath of a cork. So you can even use a jig head. You can use a 1/4 ounce jig head underneath of a popping cork, but you don't have to use a jig head. You can even just use this 2/0 circle hook. And feel free to cast it out if you're fishing with your family, your kids. You can cast it out and let it sit. Or if you want a little bit more action, you just don't want to, what we like to call bait and wait, then you can actually cast it out and you can actually give your cork a little bit of action there. So feel free to give it a few pops, here and there. So just, again, the cork, you really can't mess it up. You can let it sit, or you can actually work it kind of back to you and fishing it just like you would, an artificial bait. So the second, in my mind, easiest and most popular rig for catching redfish on live bait is going to be what we call a Carolina rig or a fish finder rig. And this is very simple. All we have right here is, so this is a 1 ounce egg weight that we have on our main line. And then we have a 2-way swivel right here that, allows our weight to stop. So then we have a 2-way swivel, and then we have about, about a 1.5 long leader line. This right here is super popular. Most guides use this and a popping cork for their 2 setups for catching redfish using live bait. So with this, you can do the same thing. You can use cut crab, you can use shrimp, you can use mullet, spot, any of your live bait, fresh cut bait. It works perfect. So it's going to have, so this is going to allow your bait to sit about 6 inches or so off of the bottom, which is right where those redfish are going to be, digging their nose into the sand, into the bottom, digging for their forage, digging for their food. So this is what we call a Carolina rig or a fish finder rig. Very easy. You can use anywhere from a 1/4 ounce, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce for your inshore setups. If you guys are fishing heavier current, then you can use heavier weights right here. So yeah, so it's super easy. So you've got your main line, you've got your egg weight right here, I like to use the bead in between the two-way swivel, about a foot and a half of leader line, and then the same thing, a number 2 size hook right here. So redfish love to feed on blue crab, and blue crab, fresh cut blue crab, provides some of the best scent for redfish. So you guys are out targeting redfish, you really cannot go wrong using this setup right here, especially using cut blue crab, fresh cut blue crab. It's going to put out a lot of those natural oils that those redfish are going to be keyed in on, you know, with their predatory senses. And they are, even if you're not in the direct vicinity of a redfish, you know, with this sitting right there around any redfish, they're going to smell it out. They're going to sniff out the fresh cut blue crab that you guys have on the bottom. And this is one of the most effective rigs and setups that you guys are going to use for catching redfish using live bait. Okay, so the third most popular way to catch redfish using live bait is just going to be using a jig head. And right here I've got a 1/4 ounce jig head, and that's just tied on to my leader line, about 15-pound test leader line. And with this jig head, you can do the same thing. You can use live shrimp, use your cut blue crab, use fresh, you know, mullet, spot, croaker, anything on this. So right now we're showing you guys some footage of us catching some redfish off of a dock using just jig heads, just fishing off the bottom. Now when you fish a jig head, you want to be more aware of the bottom. If you're fishing over oysters or fishing over some sort of structure, even grass, that you don't want to just cast it out and let it sit on the bottom. Sometimes you can do that, but you just want to be aware so you don't get it hung up. So with the jig head, it's a little bit more of a fun way to catch these redfish on live bait, because you can actually kind of work your bait back. Like you can give it a few pops, you can work it like an artificial lure. So for using live shrimp is very, very popular way to, you know, catch redfish using live shrimp on a jig head. But again, feel free to use your cut blue crab as well. You can let it sit on the bottom. You just want to be aware of what is on the bottom so it doesn't get hung up. But these are the 3 most popular and effective ways to catch redfish using live bait. Some of the other things that y'all want to keep in mind for catching redfish using live bait is a lot of the common mistakes that people make is they don't give enough time at certain fishing spots for the live bait to actually work. Or what I mean by that is you want to allow enough time for redfish to detect the scent of your live bait. So when you're fishing a spot, you know, you want to give it at least 10 to 15 minutes before you determine if this is a good spot, you know, or not. Because, you know, again, redfish could be within, you know, a close proximity, 25 yards, 30 yards or so, and they're not going to come right to your bait. But using live bait, that certainly makes things a lot easier, especially than using artificial lures, because these redfish are so keyed in to their senses and really their sense of smell. And so that's one of the things that you guys want to keep in mind for catching redfish using live bait, is make sure that you guys are giving each spot the proper amount of time. If you're there for 20-30 minutes, you're not getting anything, then you can absolutely pick up and move on to the next spot. Something else to consider for catching redfish using live bait is you want to make sure that you pick your right setup based on where you're fishing. So if you're fishing a really shallow flat, it's got a lot of oyster bars and it's got like some submerged grass there, it's only about maybe 2 to 3 or 4 feet deep, then the best setup you're going to want to use is going to be your popping cork setup. That's going to allow your bait to suspend above that structure, so you're not spending your time retying from getting hung up and getting cut off by the oysters. Now if you're fishing a deep water dock, you do not, this popping cork is probably not going to be the most effective for fishing, you know, that 10 to 15 foot dock. That's where you're going to want to have your, you know, Carolina rig or fish finder rig on the bottom, or you're going to want to have your jig head. So those are some things to consider when catching redfish using live bait. This works everywhere. It can work on the beach, inshore, can work in, you know, your larger bodies of water like Bay, Tampa Bay, Chesapeake Bay, anywhere. So hopefully that helps you guys catch more redfish using live bait.